Thank you, Chairman, and my colleagues. The topic of discussion today is on a very old topic which has been revisited, modified several times, but still we are having a sufficient number of rheumatic heart disease and rheumatic fever patients in the developing countries. So earlier it was thought to be a disease of the temperate regions in the early 20th century. And in India, the first clinical case of rheumatic fever was found in Punjab in 1935. And after that, rheumatic heart disease has become a very common disease in our country, with the incidence of rheumatic fever and prevalence of rheumatic heart disease increasing. And by 2015, India has been sharing about 37% of the global deaths due to rheumatic heart disease. So this is the escalation of the disease in our country. One is the disease is remaining stationary, it is decreasing in the developed countries, and our diagnostic, we are able to diagnose it more frequently now. So these are some of the reasons. So we'll come to these in more details in the next few slides. So the present global burden of the disease. In 2005, there were about 16 million people suffering from this disease, rheumatic heart disease, with about 200,000 deaths. And between 1990 to 2015, there has been a 48% absolute reduction in the mortality. And the mortality reduction was almost 50%, from 9.2 to 4.8%, that is globally, not in developing countries. And the pattern of this mortality reduction has been significantly varying from the economic burden of the country. And India, together with China and Pakistan, shares, as of today, 66% or 2/3 of the total rheumatic heart disease deaths. So what are the things that have been changing? The disease burden, the pathogenesis of acute rheumatic fever, some modifications into the Jones criteria, and ways of simplifying the diagnosis of ARF in moderate and high-risk populations like in the low and medium-income nations. Now, in the first topic, disease burden, what are the things we should discuss? So, the incidence of acute rheumatic fever varies widely, and it is mainly determined by their socio-economic development. It is not the temperate or a tropical country, it is the socio-economic development. And the overall global incidence even now is high, 8 to 51 per 100,000, but it is shared mainly by the developing country, India, China and Pakistan sharing about 67% of the global deaths. The true incidence in the developing countries, where we need to know about rheumatic fever, the registries are not there, very unfortunately. We cannot catch up the people. So in one of the Lancet publications, NEJM publication, the editor has given an editorial. It is the tip of the iceberg in the warm tropical waters. He has used the word warm tropical waters. So the changing trend in the incidence, what are the changing trends that we are finding? ARF incidence from the same region shows different trends over time. So in US or in Australia or in India, it has been changing. In those countries, in US or in the Western European countries, it has practically disappeared. In the aborigines of Australia and New Zealand, they are high. And in the South Asian and the East Asian countries, it is still very high. And with the growth of the population, if the percentage remains the same, the absolute number of patients with rheumatic heart disease definitely would be high. And as per the global burden of disease estimates, both these acute as well as the rheumatic heart disease incidence is based on certain modelings. We do it in school children, say 5 years to 14 years, and then we extrapolate it to the entire population or to the other groups. So there are flaws in the modeling. So that is what has been found. The modeling as well as the prevalence estimates in school children, these two things has got certain inherent flaws. So the parameters are susceptible to errors, and the extrapolated data that we are having is an underestimation, which has been reflected in the editorials of NEJM against the major article that had come up, which I had just shown in 2017. Now the question of subclinical rheumatic heart disease, can it be used as a surrogate marker for acute rheumatic fever? Because we are missing acute rheumatic fever, can we catch up by doing an echo, finding out some of the criteria of subclinical carditis, and then say that whether this is a part of rheumatic fever? Then, the advantages of echo screening versus subclinical by other surveillance. So echo can be done very easily if resources are available, or it can be repeated by multiple workers. It is not a surveillance that you have gone to the field, next day you don't find the patients there. It is comparatively less expensive than the active surveillance, and it is a pragmatic surrogate for acute rheumatic fever incidence and following time trends. So this is what we can do. There are three models of diagnosing acute rheumatic fever screening. One is continuous and active surveillance. The second one is echocardiographic screening of children from 5 to 14 years. And the third one is community survey, either in the hospitals or the registries, which we lack. So all of that have got advantages and disadvantages, but among them, the echocardiographic screening is a very potential tool which can be used in our countries if we can train up the people and have the resources accordingly. And this has come up in the current guidelines where it is considered as a major criteria for Jones criteria. We'll come to that again. Now, in the pathogenesis, there has been some changes. Pathogenesis of acute rheumatic fever remains incompletely understood even today. Evidence supports that ARF results from autoimmune response to the pharyngeal infection by the group A streptococcus in genetically predisposed individuals, and it is mediated through molecular mimicry. There is an alternative hypothesis where streptococcal M protein binding to basement membrane collagen type 4 epitopes can induce autoimmunity to collagen, resulting in a direct inflammation and scarring of the valvulas, and not through molecular mimicry. That is another thought which has been studied by Dr. Tandon, and it has come out in a very reputed journal of Nature, and in 2013, with lots of comments following this later on. However, there has been criticisms for this particular hypothesis that antibodies against collagen do not induce valvulitis in animal models. That is one. Therefore, the molecular mimicry is probably essential. That is the primary, and the age-old hypothesis of molecular mimicry still holds good for induction of autoimmunity and initiation of valve damage. And antibodies against collagen could be a contributing factors. But the recent concepts say that these are the not two only factors. There could be multiple other factors which are responsible, like in many other autoimmune diseases, where you don't have only one component. There could be multiple components in this. And these are still areas where research can be carried out at the basic science level. The Jones criteria, what are the changes that have been occurring, or the modifications and associations? We don't have a single lab criteria or a clinical feature which can diagnose the ARF. The age-old Jones criteria and its subsequent modifications in 1992 provide the basic framework, as we all know. As students also, we have learned the 1992 or the earlier model of the criteria, and the students sitting here now are probably learning the 2015 criteria. But this is basically almost the same. We are taking the help of the infection by some evidence and some clinical signs and symptoms. The incidence of, now what has happened now? In the Western countries, the disease has come down. So you don't need a very sensitive marker to detect rheumatic fever there. Rather, we need to have a very specific test. So what they are trying to do is, they have changed the pattern. At the cost of sensitivity, they have revised it to become more specific. But if we make it more specific and less sensitive, what will happen to the developing countries? We are going to miss a lot of people having the disease. So they have to come to an in-between. So there would be some people having a low risk for rheumatic heart disease and rheumatic fever, and some people with moderate and higher risk. So these will fall into the second group, whereas those in US or in UK will fall into the earlier group. And based on this, they have divided into the different population groups. So the major changes in the revision one is risk stratifications, as I have said. different implications of joint manifestations for different populations, and third one is whether you're going to accept the echocardiographic evidence of carditis as one of the major criterion. And the revision also provides guidance on diagnosing recurrent fevers, because as of the earlier one, the intermediate criteria always insisted on diagnosis of the first attack of rheumatic fever, but now they can go again back to recurrence, which is important for the developing countries. So this is a crowded slide by Webb et al. In 2015, where they have compared the Jones criteria for the low-risk population as well as the moderate and high risk, along with the criteria or the guidelines of New Zealand and Australian guidelines, where the disease is rampant in the Aborigines, not in the Caucasians of those countries, but in the Aborigines. And they have found that there are certain areas. I have just tried to make some observations here. Polyarthralgia has come in, and monoarthritis, which were not there when we were students. And in the major criteria, the subclinical echocardiographic diagnosis of carditis has come in and is a major criteria in all of these. And there are some riders like the ESR should be much higher in some populations, like those having your moderate risk, and in cases of high-risk population, it should be 30, and in New Zealand criteria, it is 50, so on and so forth. So there are some changes based on the different types of patterns. I have modified from this particular publication. Now, this was a complicated one. So for the primary care physician in India would find it really difficult which one to select. So this is a pragmatic one has been postulated for our country, simplifying ARF diagnosis in moderate and high-risk population with resource limitations. Less emphasis on evidence of preceding streptococcal sore throat infection. We may not be able to find out an ASO or an anti-DNSB. Or a temperature, we may not be able to measure the temperature, which is missed most of the time. Despite these barriers, the Jones criteria utilization, identifying patients who will develop chronic RSD, is crucial. So cardiac involvement at baseline detected by echocardiography is the best predictor of developing RSD in the future. So this is the marker they have found, and proportion of patients presenting with acute arthritis due to ARF is much higher in developing countries compared to the West. So we are leaning more with arthritis. Therefore, all children and adolescents in the endemic regions who have joint manifestations, raised ESR and CRP, with or without fever, should have an echocardiography done. And after that, what? So this is the plan. Joint manifestation, elevated phase reactance, fever we don't consider, do the echocardiography within 3 months. If there are pathological changes of an MR or an AR with some evidence of earlier damages to the heart valve, you diagnose acute rheumatic fever. If they do not have these things, no cardiac involvement on echocardiogram performed within 12 weeks of the index, diagnose if the person falls into 2015, because by this time you will definitely refer the person to a cardiologist, and the cardiologist can definitely interpret as per the complicated charts, or to a medical college where the physician himself or herself is competent enough to do it, not at the field level. But the catch point is, who is going to do the echo here? It is well said and done, but how many of our secondary hospitals do have a very expert echocardiography team? So these are some of the catch points here. Now the challenging issues, I will be brief here. There is marked heterogeneity in the burden of rheumatic fever projected in the 2015 global burden of diseases, with near zero prevalences in the developed countries and substantially high prevalence and mortality in developing countries. Scarcity of acutely measured data, especially in high prevalence regions, aggravates the situation. Where we need the data, we don't have it. In developing countries with high disease, subclinical rheumatic heart disease, which is basically echo-based, is mostly not taken into consideration. We don't have it here. With the near disappearance from the developed countries, there is relative neglect of the disease. This is very important. HIV, TB, and malaria is 3 to 5 times higher in the incidence than rheumatic heart disease. But if you look at this chart, the funds spent for these 3 diseases is 500 to 1,000 times. So rheumatic heart disease is neglected. If there was an HIV coming into this particular disease, all the funds from US and WHO would have come to this disease, because they don't have the disease going to the West. They don't perceive that. That's why they're not using the funds here. So that is one of the catch points why there is no more development here. Even the plans for developing a vaccine has been put into the cold shelf. Now, what are the global research priorities here? Translating what we know already into practical conversions, that is the most important thing. How to identify people with RSD at an earlier stage so that preventive measures can be taken. Better understanding of disease pathogenesis with a view to improved diagnosis and treatment, and finding an effective approach to primary prevention. Translating what we already know. New approaches to integrating the centralized control programs using RSD registers to understand the disease and to improve delivery of secondary prophylaxis. These are some of the key points. And effectiveness of comprehensive programs of the rheumatic heart disease control, the burden and economics of rheumatic heart disease and its control, and the role of cardiac surgery. Because at the end point, even after secondary prophylaxis, we cannot do anything. The end point or the ultimate thing is to go for cardiac surgery to save the life of the individual or to prolong the life. So these are the things which should be done from the knowledge that we already have. Early detection for the better prevention. Standardization of the echocardiography, evidence-based diagnostic criteria, determining the significance of subclinical carditis, determining the cost effectiveness of screening and making it practical and affordable. And better understanding. Maybe we can develop some immunological preventions or genetic screening in the long-term future if it is possible. A vaccine which is not perceived in the near future. The meetings were held in India a few years back, but unfortunately, none of the funds were being diverted to this part. The role of primary prophylaxis of streptococcal sore throat infection. So with that, most of the people may be having a viral sore throat will also be treated with antibiotic. So that is practically not advisable. And the role of controlling skin infections. Because like in acute streptococcal, post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis, a person who has got repeated skin infections and after that he gets a gas infection in the throat, the chances of development of acute rheumatic fever is very high because the skin infections has already primed the person. So that is an important concept important for research. To conclude, despite reduction in global burden of rheumatic fever and rheumatic heart disease, it continues to be high in the low and medium income group countries. Failure to detect these diseases in developing countries still continues. We are not able to diagnose it. Diagnostic criteria have been updated with subclinical diagnosis of carditis by echo has been included in the major criteria. Appropriate criteria for use of low-risk population of developed nations and moderate and high-risk populations of developing countries as is applicable, translating what we know already into practical means of control of the disease, how to identify people with rheumatic heart disease at an earlier stage of the disease so that preventive measures have a better chance of success, better understanding of disease pathogenesis with a view to improve diagnosis and treatment of the disease, and finding an effective approach for primary prevention. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya, for your nice presentation on rheumatic fever and rheumatic heart disease. Now I invite only one question from the gallery. If there is no question, I like to conclude the session.
Just one word if I can have. I am from Shillong. There is an institute called NEGRIMS, which is a central government medical college in the northeast. The East Zone Epicon will be held there on 23rd and 24th of November. And the Meghalaya chapter would be hosting it in collaboration with the East Zone chapter. So I invite all of you to the conference, and those who are not present, please convey it to your friends also. And all of you are invited. There will be very good weather there. It will be sunny and very cold. You can go out to Cherrapunji and other good places also from there. And the view of Shillong itself is beautiful. So I welcome all of you there. Thank you.
Thank you.